Okay, we're going to do a little crank assembling here. We left off last night on this motor. So I had to had some issues with the main bearings here. They didn't fit. These bearings here, this is oversized bearings in this cage. There's mixtures of small ones and big ones in this cage. So when you put it together, it locks up the crank in the case here. So I had to change these out. This one here is a little bit tighter than what the other ones are, but this one here actually locks the crank up. So there's big ones and small ones mixed in here. It's made wrong. So just because you got new parts doesn't mean it's any good. So this here is the second set of bearings, which are these are 2/10 over bearings. And the way you check these is you go ahead and put them on the crank here, and then you put the case on it. So the easiest way to do this by yourself is to lay the flywheel down, flip the case upside down, stick it on top of it. So you got it slid on there, and then you slide up the flywheel from the bottom, and then you can walk it back and forth. Hear the clearance in there? I'm actually walking it back and forth like this. So if you look real close, you can see the pinion shaft moving right there. So you want to have that little bit of that clearance in there like that. And you want to check it both sides. You turn it 90 degrees and check it again. So if it's got clearance, it goes up and down freely, so that means that part's good. So you can also see the finish I use on these things is pretty fine, so that's good too. So anyway, that was one of the problems I ran into, so had to do a little extra rework last night. That happens. So just because it's new parts doesn't mean the new parts have any value. Okay, so these are new bearings. Gotta make sure we don't mix them up with our old bearings over here. So I already marked them as being bad. I'll have to mark the box as being bad too. That's the second set I've had that's been bad from this company. These are old Dixie bearings. So Dixie's gone now, but the stuff's still up on eBay, so you have to pay attention. I gotta find a new source for bearings. Look at his old Teddy cycle. I don't want to go to him. There goes somebody else. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and assemble up the flywheel assembly, put the rods in here, get this going. So first thing I'm going to do is get the crank pin in the flywheel and torque it in. So we already did the washers here, knocked them in there, peened them good. So they're in there. Also balanced the flywheel, so we know they're all balanced. So let me get over here a little bit. You're not quite that close. Okay, so we got our crank pin here. We got this out of that Dixie rod set. We're going to put our key in here. Takes a short, fat key. The earlier models had a longer, fat key. Okay, I use two Loctites. I use red Loctite for the nut, and I use sleeve retainer Loctite for the taper. Make sure you do not put the Loctite in the oil hole right there. So you put a little bit on there, not where the hole is. Smear it around your finger a little bit. I don't put a Loctite up here in the upper part of the taper because that just squeezes up into the rod where we don't need it. And like I said, you want to stay away from the darn oil hole too. And you just take the red Loctite and put some on the threaded part. It should slide right together. Okay, we're going to use the old Harley nuts because they're probably better quality than the imported Dixie nuts. There we go. Didn't want to start very well. Okay, I need an 1.5-inch socket. And a zip gun to put it together. So torqued it in there. I'm going to take it over the press and torque it some more. So the press is over here. Way over there is the press. We're not going to move this thing away. So we're going to hold the flywheel there and torque it to the torque wrench with a torque wrench. Use the press to hold the flywheel and align it. Alright, that's torqued. Back to this side. I'm the cameraman today, so you get what you get. Okay, I pull that down to 350 foot-pounds, which is a lot more than Harley's, probably 200 they want to use. If you don't keep these things tight, they will scissor on you, just like the new bikes do. Okay. Now, when I tighten them that much, it spreads the flywheel, but we put all the extra pins in the washer, and the washer's tight. If we didn't do that, the washer would be spinning right now, probably. Okay, now we can go ahead and you look right here, make sure there's no Loctite down in here. If there is, wipe it off. This one appears to be pretty good, but I always like to make sure, so I just put the towel in there and run it across just to make sure. It also wipes the crank pin down one more time. Then we take our assembly lube, which is Torco. Everybody keeps asking what kind of chemicals I use. I get tired of responding. That's why I pretty much tell you every time what I use in the videos, because every time there's a new video, people want to know what chemicals I use again. I don't feel like making a chemical video, so because nobody would watch it. And they still ask me what chemicals I use. Next thing they're going to want to buy, I'm going to have to sell them to them. Be more work. Okay, so we got that all lubed up. Now you take your aluminum cages. That one goes in the middle. Slide it on there. Take the rod set, the big one. Put it on the correct direction helps. And I take the flywheel, put it on there. We're going to do a mock-up and see if the rod locks up. It did not lock up. See, when I over torque the flywheels, I squeeze them a lot, so we want to make sure that we have in-plane here. So you make sure you got side to side right in here. See that right there? That's perfect. It's got side to side. I want at least, I prefer having at least 18 or 20 at least. I don't like being less than that. So if you get less than that, then it starts chewing up the rust washers on the crank. And the oil doesn't flow quite as good. Okay, so that was our mock-up. See how it's stuck together real good? So that means I get to use my hammer now. So we pull out our big hammer, and we beat the crap out of it. Now, when you beat on it is important. You hit it 180 degrees from the crank pin on the flat part of the flywheel. Do not hit at an angle or you'll dimple the flywheel. That breaks the taper off, it comes right off. The If you have a little light hammer, it won't pop. You have to hit it a lot of real hard, and that tends to damage the metal. So in that case, you want a heavier hammer. More mass, less pressure does the job. Okay, now we can go ahead and put the bearings in here, which are all loose, and we have to fish them in by hand. So you get real good at poking bearings in here. We already cleaned these bearings off before, so we didn't have any of that Dixie lubricant in them, which I'm sure was pretty dirty. Now, aluminum cages have 17 rollers to a row. So you got 17 long ones and 17 short ones, 20 times 2. So you have to do your math and figure out what that is. And these are considered the short rollers because the steel early cages have 18 per row, and the steel new cages have 16 to a row. So the newer the bike, the less bearing area you have. Harley's great wisdom again. So I like using the panhead steel cages instead of the shovelhead aluminum cages, and throw away the Evo steel cages because they're crap, which is what everybody seems to use these days, S&S included. They're cheap, that's why they do it. I'll probably tell you don't need all that extra bearing area in there. Alright, here's the first handful. There's a slight technique on doing this, but you'll have to figure that on your own. Comes from practice. It's best if you don't lose any of the bearings. It probably wouldn't matter that much if you lost one every now and then off of here, but that's not a good practice to lose parts. Yep. Now the assembly lube helps hold the rollers in because it gives them some stickum. Makes it a lot easier to put these together because they stay put. If you flip the flywheel up to the side and let the bearings all fall out, they'll start falling out from gravity, so that's why we have it standing upright. If you pack these full of grease, they might never get the grease out, and the bearings won't be rolling, they'll be sliding, which will tear up the bearings and the crank pin. That's why you don't use grease. You want to use a thick oil. It appears that I have all of them. Last one, last hole. There we go. Where's my grease? Okay, now I'm going to put another layer of oil on the outside, because this is the only oil you're going to get until an oil pump starts pumping, and that might take a while. Don't be afraid to put too much on there. In this case, it doesn't make any difference. Unlike pistons and piston rings, it does matter. Okay, so you got a little bit of oil there. We'll put a little bit of oil over here on the thrust washer. Stay away from the taper, obviously, because we're going to put Loctite on that. That's the brass washers, all you need. We go ahead and do the rods too. You can see the nice fine finish we got on that too. It's like a mirror finish, so the break-in on these is not much because there's not much to break in. When you're on really fine surfaces finish, it's not much to break in. It's really fine. Make sure you get oil on the thrust faces here too. Okay, it's all lubed up. Okay, now you take the rod, you put them together like that. See how they don't go together that way? They don't get very close together. Flip it over. See, it goes a lot closer like it's supposed to. So make sure you do it correctly. The rear rod goes in the rear hole. That'd be the forked rod, in case you don't know that. So you got to make sure when you're on the pinion shaft here, the forked rod is on the back, male rod in the front. If you do it backwards, it'll still run. It's not the way it's supposed to be though. Okay, now you wipe off the residue oil that's on the taper here. I'm not sure why there's some on there, but there's a little bit. Then we put our sleeve retainer on there, Loctite. This is very important. Don't get too much on this because we can't wipe this off after we assemble it. It's whatever's on here is on here. So you want just a thin layer again on that. And you put a little bit of red on the thread. Here you go. So you can see the Loctite ends about right here where my finger is. And you can see I got the red in there. I don't put it all the way to the outside edge. I go in about 2 threads and I put it on from there. Now you take the flywheel, stick it on. I purposely put it offset and then rotate down. It helps smear the Loctite across the whole surface in case you did a lousy job of doing it with your finger. Then you take your nut, put it on there. There it goes. Okay, now when you tighten this up, you want to make sure you don't scissor it like this. So you got to push it down flat against the bench, the crank pin 90 degrees to the table so you get maximum advantage for you for holding it. And you just tighten it down just a little bit, not much. Then you take your 6-inch scale, ruler, whatever you want to call it, and see how uneven the flywheel is. This one here, we're about 5 to 10 thou difference at most, probably about 5, so I can live with that. If it scissors real bad on you, take it apart, pop it, redo it, try to get it tightened up so they're straight here. Because whatever you tighten it right now, it's going to be hard to fix in the truing stand. So get it as straight as you can now. Okay, now we go over to the press. We're going to tighten this up. And then we're going to the truing stand and true it. So I'm going to put away my chemicals here. Okay, I need this one. Prelude my tapers here because I don't have time to put oil over there. All right. Now we go over to our press. I take my camera here. Got the tripod. One-man job. All right. Sit that there for a second. Okay. There's our press. Let me reset the tripod here so you can see. Give me a minute here. Finger. Okay. Get here where you can see a little bit. Okay, now you set the press in here. You want to make sure that you press on the top of the flywheel here, right in the center. And use the press ways to keep the flywheel true. And then we torque the snot out of it. So there's the flywheel torque. Give it an initial hit. So 300's right here, 400's right there. We go in between. Stop about half torque. Recenter the flywheel. That way the flywheels don't get tightened up at an angle like that. Hopefully not anyway. There we go. What'd I go to? Almost 350. Yeah, give it a little extra. 375. Okay, now that's torqued in there pretty good. Last thing you want to do, you want to make sure the rods slide back and forth on the flywheel. So, get over here. You can see how they slide back and forth. Make sure everything's free, not locked up. The rods still move. And obviously make sure that the pinion shaft is on this side and the rear rod is in the rear. Time now to fix it before you true it. Okay, I'm going to set the truing stand. We'll be back when we get the truing stand set up.